Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: President Trump saying the U.S. is actively talking to China to get a fair trade deal. More on his comments about trade between Washington and Beijing.
We are going to have a fair deal with China. It's going to be fair.
Solar panels from Chinese-owned factories could face massive new tariff rates, some as high as 3,400%. Details on the Chinese-made panels that aren't from China. How is the trade conflict between the U.S. and China expected to play out? An expert breaks it down.
You're seeing that China's trying to stimulate, give people money to spend, and yet people are holding on to it.
And a foreign agent case is scheduled to go to trial this summer. Linda Sun, former aide to two New York governors, facing accusations that she helped further Beijing's interests while serving as a state official. We have the latest. The U.S. is actively talking to China to get a fair trade deal. That's what President Trump told reporters early Wednesday as the administration signals room for tariff adjustment.
Can you clarify, Mr. President, on China?
Yeah, we are going to have a fair deal with China. It's going to be fair.
Are you talking to them actively now?
Actively. Everything's active. Everybody wants to be a part of what we're doing. They know that they can't get away with it any longer, but they're still going to do fine. And we're going to have a country that you can be proud of, not a laughing stock all over the world for many years.
Chinese goods to the U.S. now face up to 245% tariffs, while U.S. goods on China are subject to 125% tariffs. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said Wednesday that if the U.S. sticks with its tariffs, Beijing would do the same. Trump previously warned China that the U.S. will set the deal if Beijing doesn't make a trade agreement and end tariffs.
Ultimately, they have to make a deal because otherwise they're not going to be able to deal in the United States. So we want them involved, but they have to, and other countries have to make a deal. And if they don't make a deal, we'll set the deal.
Trump also signaled some level of tariff relief for China. He said tariffs on Chinese goods would come down substantially, but it won't be zero. That was in response to comments describing the trade tensions as unsustainable. Trump imposed tariffs on trade partners to reduce the trade deficit and bring jobs back to the U.S. The total U.S. trade deficit reached over $1 trillion last year. The White House says it has hollowed out America's manufacturing base and forced the U.S. to rely on foreign adversaries for defense and medical goods. Trump said the U.S. is set to rake in profits from tariffs and that the days of countries ripping off the U.S. are over.
China is an example, but it's not just China. European Union, they ripped us off for many, many years, and those days are over. We're going to make a lot of money for our people.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Wednesday said there's an opportunity for a major trade deal between the U.S. and China.
China's current economic model is built on exporting its way out of its economic troubles. It's an unsustainable model that is not only harming China, but the entire world.
Bessent also added that China was in need of a rebalancing and needs to change. Which U.S. states will feel the greatest impact from China's 125% tariff on American exports? Topping the list, Texas, California, Washington, Louisiana, and North Carolina. That's according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. These states make up the bulk of U.S. exports to China, energy and agricultural products. Here's a breakdown. In 2024, Texas mostly exported energy to China. For Washington state, its exports to China include aircraft, spacecraft, fruit, seeds, and grain. Louisiana exports energy and agricultural products like grain to China. California exports machinery, medical instruments, and electronics to China, while North Carolina mostly sends over pharmaceutical products. Zooming out, President Trump imposed tariffs on goods from China with the goal of reducing the U.S. trade deficit and bringing jobs back home. China has stood out among other trading partners for its unfair trade practices, including theft of U.S. intellectual property. The estimated loss from that IP theft falls between $200 billion to $600 billion every year. Staying on duties, the Commerce Department has announced what could be the highest individual tariff rate yet, a sky-high potential maximum of roughly 3,400%. That's the penalty that could apply to some solar panels made by China-owned suppliers which ship to the U.S. Chinese-owned solar factories that operate across Southeast Asia have long offered China a unique loophole. They allow Chinese-made solar panels to flow into the U.S. while avoiding U.S. tariffs. That's because despite the manufacturers being Chinese-owned, the products are at least partially made in other countries and shipped to the U.S. from there. To target the gap, the Trump administration on Monday announced potential tariffs targeting some solar panel imports from Southeast Asia. 4 solar panel makers in Cambodia could be hit with individual tariffs reaching 3,400%. That's including Chinese solar module manufacturer Jinko Solar, which runs some of its operations in Cambodia but is headquartered in Shanghai, China. Some companies operating in Thailand will face tariffs of around 800%, while those in Vietnam are looking at a potential 543%, and others in Malaysia could see rates climb to 169%. China controls roughly 90% of the market share in critical parts of the solar supply chain, meaning these Chinese-owned companies remain major suppliers of solar technology to the U.S. And because they're based in Southeast Asia, their exports often come in below U.S. market value. That undercuts American companies, pushing domestic solar products out of the U.S. market and costing American workers their jobs. The U.S. International Trade Commission is set to make a final decision on the tariff rates on June 2nd. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told investors he believes a trade deal with China can be reached. NTD's Carrie Dunst spoke to Tim Dosher, executive director at Unleash Prosperity, to discuss the issue.
Trump is pushing for a fully reciprocal trade agreement with all nations, while also looking to onshore production of precisely the things that are made in China, right? Steel, pharmaceuticals, electronics, solar, shipbuilding. So how do you expect the balance to play out between protecting industry but also having trade reciprocity with China?
Well, I think, there's so many things wrapped up into that, but I think the big word there is retail sales. Both in China and in the United States of America. And I think that that's where this is coming down. If you look at the past 8 quarters in China's economy, you're seeing that China's trying to stimulate, give people money to spend, and yet people are holding on to it. So there's a hesitancy in China. All the while, you have Trump saying, hey, we're going to slap this massive tariff on you, potentially stalling goods from moving into China, into the U.S. And so I think China's really in a bad position right now. As you heard Caroline Levitt say, the numbers. She talks about the numbers. And I think when you start to dig deeper into China's economy, you start to see that China needs a deal with the United States. Like I need to get rid of this bad artwork in this hotel room I'm in right now. So it really is an interesting point that we're in right now in this economy. And I do think that a deal will be struck very soon. It's just a matter of, will we continue to hold our cards close to our chest?
Yeah, indeed, the artwork is bad. No, I'm just kidding. In terms of the rate that we'll land at, we're at 145%. Trump says that's egregious and it will come down significantly. On the other side of the spectrum, we just reported the political pressure internally that she is under. So where do you think we might net out on the rates?
It's a good question. And again, I think that's going to be, what Trump always says when people say, well, tell us exactly what you're going to do. And he says, that'd be the stupidest thing in the world to tell you what I'm going to do, because that would, impede my ability to negotiate. And so I think that right now is being worked out. I think that's all the scuttlebutt that we're hearing behind the scenes. But I will say this, while I make the case that, the retail is going to hurt those in China, it's also going to hurt us. There's no question about it. We have become reliant on cheap goods coming from China to buy on Amazon, to buy and other retailers here, Walmart, things like that. And if we continue to keep with high tariffs on, we will feel that as consumers, and we will begin to start checking our bank accounts and our wallets and saying, do I actually need to buy that ring light? Do I need to buy whatever that cheap product from China is? So I think we want to get as low as possible with China, while at the same time continuing to hold them accountable for the cheating that they have been doing for years against the United States of America.
And I want to get into that in a second, but I do want to go more to the tough medicine that those are Trump's words and what you're describing. Is that just part of the process of being able to onshore things that we need for national security?
Look, and this is one of the arguments that as we talk about tariffs, especially in the mainstream media, I mean, how irresponsible is it that we're not talking about the reason that we're doing these tariffs, according to the president, which is national security? He's doing this under his under executive order by the statute AIPA, which allows him in emergency circumstances to implement tariffs unilaterally without Congress, which you're normally supposed to do. So we can't lose focus of bringing some of these crucial sectors back to the United States of America for our national security. Look, talk to any person in the military who can speak without violating their top secret clearance. And what China is doing in the South China Sea, on that side of the world, is unheard of. It is unparalleled. And it's almost, they're war games, basically, playing against us that we're financing by continuing to prop them up, by continuing to use them. They are not our allies. They are our enemies, especially militarily. And so when you talk about onshoring, bringing those things back to America, we could even bring them to other nations who aren't threatening us militarily. Those things would be a great thing. And I think that is also part of the equation, is not just bringing them all back to the United States of America, but bring them to friend countries that we can have a better relationship with, get a good deal, and also be able to accommodate the workforce. Because in America, look, unfortunately, a lot of those jobs we do not have the workers for at this point. So we will need a little bit more time to do that fully onshore.
Next, updates on a landmark foreign agent case, the United States versus Linda Sun. A judge announced the case is scheduled to go to trial in late July. Here's what happened on Wednesday in the Eastern District Court of New York.
Earlier today in the Eastern District Court of New York, Linda Sun and her husband, co-defendant Chris Hu, appeared alongside their attorneys for a court conference. The polished look couple allegedly earned millions of dollars in kickbacks for their ties to the Chinese regime. During the court meeting, a prosecutor revealed that they are finalizing Chinese translations of evidence against Sun. Those include text messages, emails, and other communications between Sun and Chinese officials. These materials are expected to be made public during the trial. Sun served as New York Governor Kathy Hochul's top aide in charge of Asian affairs. In 2023, Sun was fired for misconduct without specifying reasons. Last September, federal law enforcement arrested her and her husband. They now face multiple criminal accounts. Sun is accused of acting as an unregistered foreign agent of Communist China, making her case one of the most high-profile cases of its kind. The government accuses Sun of furthering Beijing's interest while being a state official, including disclosing internal COVID-related meetings to Chinese diplomats and blocking Taiwanese officials' interactions with two New York governors. Images show Sun had attended multiple meetings hosted by China's spy agency and other state entities.
Coming up, many restaurants in China pulling American beef from their menus. More on why they're switching and what they're switching to. 20 humanoid robots joined a half marathon in Beijing. Who came out on top? Vice President Vance concludes his visit to India. What did he leave behind, and where are U.S.-India relations headed? An expert chimes in. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. U.S. beef is one of thousands of products hit by the trade war between the world's two largest economies. And in many restaurants in Beijing, even American-style steakhouses, kitchens are switching to Australian beef instead.
The U.S.-China trade war means American beef, the star of the menu at this Texas-style smokehouse in Beijing, will soon be off the table. U.S. beef is an unaffordable option after Beijing's 125% retaliatory tariffs, on top of an existing 22%. Come May, diners at Home Plate BBQ will be tucking into beef ribs, brisket, and sausages, still done in the style of the American South, but mostly sourced from Australia. Operations Director Charles DePaulette says the switch to brisket from Down Under is 40% cheaper than continuing to buy American.
Once we deplete our stocks of that, we'll be switching fully over to Australian M5. We're pretty happy with it. We still think it's the same taste and quality and flavour, but we've had to switch just due to market pressures and the tariffs. Stocks are low in China and the prices have doubled.
Pork isn't exempt either. He says their ribs will soon come from Canada. Even before the trade war began, American beef was expensive, partly because of shortages caused by years of dry weather. Those higher prices were already hard to swallow for consumers in China's weak economy. Local university student Yan says he eats imported beef once every few months because the taste is so good. So he doesn't mind forking out the extra cost once in a while just to experience it. He also says that great flavor isn't exclusive to the US and that he's happy to try beef from anywhere. Homeplate BBQ's experience is being repeated across Beijing's restaurants. That's according to a beef supplier based in the capital who spoke anonymously because of the sensitivity of discussing tariffs. While the $125 million worth of beef the US sends to China every month is a sliver of trade between the two sides, its disappearance in China is a glimpse of what's to come for other goods. Tian Chen-Xu, a senior economist at the Economist Intelligence Unit, says China seems to be lowering its dependence on US exporters.
I think there's an additional layer, which is China is intentionally hitting the U.S. farming sector, which means that U.S. farmers will be very difficult to find an exemption from China. Yeah, so I think essentially the beef trade will be blocked. Yeah, and Chinese importers or U.S. exporters need to find something alternative markets.
He estimates across the board, 80% of US-China trade is being hit by mutual tariffs. And he says that will only deepen the decoupling between China and the US in terms of trade.
Uncertainty amid tariffs. Next, let's take a closer look at what some American liquor businesses are facing right now and how one bar owner in California is adapting.
Like many industries affected by Trump's wave of tariffs, the liquor business is facing a period of deep uncertainty. In Oakland, California, William Choi prides himself on the global flavors available at his bar Viridian.
We definitely use Ming River Baijiu coming out of China. We have cognac from France. We have rum from, Barbados. We have whiskey from Japan.
Tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump are targeting dozens of countries, including those where Choi sources his spirits. Imports from the European Union, Japan, and Mexico face tariffs between 20 and 25%, while those from China have been slapped with the highest rate of all at 145%.
It's like riding a roller coaster. One day we're like, okay, well maybe, and then the next day it's like right back down. So we're just in a very constant state of flux, I would say.
Choi says he's already raised prices as high as he can. Now he'll just have to get creative to stay afloat, like creating a homemade acid solution to replace limes or slightly lowering the amount of alcohol in drinks.
We're very resilient. We've learned to be. We've had to be, and so yes, there's a lot of uncertainty, but that's just the world we live in right now.
The tech race between the U.S. and China spans several major areas, and one of them is humanoid robots. The biggest concern that they could serve military purposes as well as civilian ones. 21 humanoid robots joined thousands of runners at a half marathon in Beijing on Saturday. It's the first time these machines have raced alongside humans. Let's take a look.
Humanoid robots raced against humans for the first time in a half marathon in China's Beijing on Saturday. The robots were accompanied by human trainers who sometimes had to physically support the machines during the race. One of the robots fell over at the starting line and lay flat on the ground. Another crashed into a railing after running a short distance, causing its human operator to fall over. The winning robot, Tiangong Ultra, finished in 2 hours and 40 minutes. A long way to go before it can surpass the men's winner, who finished in 1 hour and 2 minutes. Although humanoid robots have made appearances at marathons in China over the past year, this was the first time they were competing alongside humans. The robots from Chinese manufacturers such as Droid UP and Noetics Robotics came in different shapes and sizes. Some were shorter than 4 feet, while some were nearly 6 feet tall.
Vice President J.D. Vance just finished his 4-day visit in India. India is hoping to strike a trade deal with the U.S., its biggest trading partner, before a 90-day pause on steep U.S. tariffs runs out. How will J.D. Vance's visit influence U.S.-India relations? To discuss these latest developments, NTD's Steve Lance was joined by Mark Gober, author of the book An End to the Upside Down Reset.
Mark Gober, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Of course, Mark. Vice President J.D. Vance visiting India this week, accompanied by Second Lady Usha Vance and as well as senior administration officials. This signals somewhat of a new chapter in U.S.-India relations. What do you think is the diplomatic mission behind this visit, and what will sort of indicate that this trip was a success?
Well, to me, it speaks to the broader desire to strike deals with other nations, which I think will be a very favorable thing for the marketplace at large. My career before I started writing books was in the realm of intellectual property and patent transactions. So what's happening with the tariffs actually reminds me a lot of what happens in the business industry, where companies will sometimes sue each other for patent infringement, and it looks like it's messy. And then a few weeks or months later, all of a sudden they resolve their terms, they have a cross-licensing deal, and everything's been settled. So I think that's what might be happening, and hopefully India is a first step.
Now, in the Indo-Pacific, where China seeks regional dominance, not just global dominance, how critical is a strong U.S.-India alliance in countering China?
I think it's very important to have an alliance in that region and also to have more alliances around the world. I think it will put pressure on China to try to strike a deal.
India has committed to liberalizing trade with the U.S. following Prime Minister Modi's White House visit in February. As China's economy falters, how do you see U.S.-India trade agreements playing out? And are we likely to see India slash tariffs on American imports to their country?
It's a good question. It remains to be seen, but I think there are, like, again, I saw this in the intellectual property industry, there are benefits to first movers. So if there are countries that are willing to make the first move and make agreements with the U.S., it will put pressure on everyone else, and they might get a better deal. So the fact that we're seeing India come out first, it could be very favorable for them and for the U.S.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.